Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Mono Service conference call hosted by Marco Rossi. My name is Julie, and I'm your event manager. During the presentation, your lines will remain on listen only. If you require assistance at any time, please key star and then 0 on your telephone, and a coordinator will be happy to assist you. I would like to advise all parties this conference is being recorded for replay purposes, and now I'd like to hand over to Marco. Please go ahead.
Okay, thanks very much for that. Good afternoon. Welcome to you wherever you are. In some cases, I believe it's more appropriate to say good morning. So, welcome here from Augsburg in Germany. My name is Marco Rossi, and I'm a product marketing manager here for the TX servers. And I will give you a brief overview regarding the PRIMERGY RX100 S7, TX120 S3, TX140 S1. Okay, so here is a brief overview of the agenda. These are the things we'll be looking at shortly. So firstly, we'll start by describing what is the sales, who's the customer and what their pain points are. Then we'll look at the common features for all these three systems. We'll then take a look at each of the systems in turn, and finally we'll have a brief look at some benchmarks which were done by Intel in some cases with one of our systems, as we'll see, and which may be good in helping you when you're dealing with customers and they're saying to you, well, why should I use the new version of the Xeons? The old one was good enough. So that's just a little bit of ammunition there. So the situation in a nutshell. So we had a look at what Gartner and friends were saying about what SMEs and SME customers look for, and they, of course, they don't have a lot of personnel, they don't have unlimited cash, and as a result, they want something that's easy to manage. They want to have something where the TCO is low. They want to have longer-term value from their investment. In other words, they don't want to buy a new server every other month. The server should ideally have some room for growth. It should evolve to some extent with the company as the company evolves. So these are the things we've been focusing on, and this is how, this is the type of market that these systems are geared towards. As you can see here, we don't only mention SMEs and branch offices, but also data centers. So the sweet spot of these systems is more SMEs and branch offices, but as we'll see, they do touch a little bit on the data center side of things, and we'll describe that later on. What do all of these systems have in common? Well, of course, the first thing is that they're based on the Intel Bromelo platform with the Intel Xeon processor E3 family and the Intel C200 chipset. That's obviously the most prominent change. They all offer the optional front service LAN, so that makes easier to service the system. They all have PCI Express Gen 2 slots, and which are PCI Gen 3 ready, so that when we start to offer PCI Gen 3 cards, which should be in the second half of next calendar year, then customers will be able to integrate those as well. Of course, SANS 2.0, and next we have a, from my point of view, very interesting item, which is the fact that the systems in this category have 2 times 1 gigabit LAN on board as standard. So that's in every system straight off the bat. And they offer the latest version of the remote management controller, the S3 version, with gigabit LAN, meaning that they that this now supports the latest switches available out there on the market. Let's dive into the first system, and here the system we're going to look at is the RX100S7. So you can see it says rack virtualization starts here. Well, I hope you're able to see it because there's this rectangle at the top corner, which I'm afraid I don't know where it comes from, but that's what it would say if you were to read were to be able to read the whole of the title. And the RX100S7 is a multi-usage 1U SME rack server, which can also be used in a data center setting. So it's multi-usage. In other words, it's for the classic tasks which should expect file, print, web, etc., etc. But because it is highly available, because it's got redundant PSU and fans and hot plug hard disks, it can also be used in a data center, particularly if you're going to do some entry-level virtualization. So this is what I meant before when we said that we had a system capable of being used in a data center with this one, because, as I said, it can be virtualized. So we're going to have a look now at the usage scenarios for this system. And first of all is in SME or branch office scenario. It's probably a very average company, if you like. They might have a sales department, a purchasing department, a finance department, and some of the clients could be either notebooks or some could be desktop PCs. And these could be connected to an RX100S7 either to print, web server, maybe as a file server as well, and they're connected to a TX120. And the heavy-duty applications would be performed by the RX600S5, particularly in the case of, I don't know, heavy load in terms of databases. When we think about the RX100S7, the thing that we should bear in mind is that it's very modular. In other words, it can be configured to meet a whole variety of scenarios, even though it's only one system. And because of that, it can also meet a number of price points. So if you are looking at an SME, just looking for a basic print or web server, they could easily configure the system with a simple SATA hard disk. In case of file servers, they would be able to integrate SAS, maybe with modular RAID. And in case of data centers, they would be able to include the same options as for the file server, plus the redundant fans and hot plug PSUs. If we now take a look at the RX100S7 with the cover off, if we start at the very top, you see the arrow 12 o'clock is showing us where the CPU is. To the right of that arrow, we have the hot plug hard disks, the front VGA and front service LAN, and at about 6 o'clock, you can see the optional redundant fans with 4+1 redundancy. Next to that are the memory modules, and then above it, the hot plug PSU, and next to them, the I/O slots. What I'd like to point out regarding the hot plug PSUs and the redundant fans is that they're only sold together. In other words, if the customer chooses to have the standard PSUs, then he only has 4 standard fans. The fifth fan is there for redundancy purposes, and as I said, it's not available with the standard PSU. The view from the rear side shows us the optional hot plug power supplies, the LAN port, the serial, the VGA port, the USB, and the second onboard LAN. Now the RX100, as we said before, has 2 power supplies, when we look at the standard power supply, the efficiency of this power supply corresponds to CSCI Gold, whereas the efficiency of the hot plug power supply for 230 volts corresponds to CSCI Platinum. So that's about as good as it gets at the moment in terms of efficiency. And we are comparing it to the predecessor. If we do a side-by-side comparison, the first difference is, of course, in the processor, and then next, the fourth line down would be obviously in the chipset and the memory frequency. There's no difference in the number of hard disks, and there is a difference, of course, in the PCI Express slots, all of which are generation 2, and which incidentally also have a time 16 slot. This is another one of the common features that has been integrated in all three of the machines we will look at today. The RAID is the same. The manageability and security here, the difference is with respect to the remote management controller, which now supports gigabit LAN, the optional front service LAN, and then if we go down to the fans, as we said, the redundancy, and the fact that for the PSU we now have two different PSU, a standard one and a hot plug one. The next item we'll look at are the commonalities. The commonality between the TX120S3 and the TX140S1. So I guess that some of you may have seen this slide before. It shows the MX and TX units, and of course the MX130 is the entry level, going right up to the TX300. The thing I would like to point out here is that the TX140 has been placed before the TX150 because in some respects it is the little brother of the TX150, even though the TX140 does support the latest processor technology. But we'll have a deeper look at that shortly. So the first thing I'd like to point out here is the fact that when it comes to commonality, it doesn't get much more common than this. They both have exactly the same motherboard. So regardless of whether or not a customer purchased TX120 or TX140, the motherboard is one and the same. TX120S3. What have we improved? So we've improved the fact that now it can take up to Intel Xeon processors. The fact that the expandability has been improved. We have two base units with this system. One supporting a maximum of 4 2.5-inch hard disks, and in this base unit you can also include 4 2.5-inch hard disks, a DVD, and a backup medium. So all of these are possible, which is not the case before. In the other base unit, it's a cost-optimized base unit where you can include a maximum of 2 times 3.5-inch hard disk. So this has been obviously improved. Now, we also improved the top position of the system because the TX120 in the past, due to its small size, carried a premium which made it more expensive than the TX150. Now this is no longer going to be the case. The TX120 is pretty much at the same price level as the TX140, and the way this was achieved was by using one and the same motherboard. For those of you unfamiliar with the TX120 series, the main idea behind this system is that it is aimed at customers who need high server functionality, who need remote management, who need hot plug hard disks, but who also have an issue in terms of size. So they want to have some fairly high demand, but not only in terms of functionality, also in terms of size. So the classic examples for a system such as this one would be smaller retail premises, branch offices, doctors or lawyers, practices, etc., etc. And these are the types of customers that the system is aimed at. For example, customers who may have legal issues with not keeping records over a certain period of time. Those would be TX120 customers. So I told you before that we're able to integrate a great deal of components, so now we're going to have a look at what we can integrate. We'll start at the top right-hand corner. You'll see the standard PSU, and going down, you can see the optical tape drive just above the DVD, and to the left of that, 4 times 2.5-inch hot plug HDD. So that is the configuration I was describing earlier. These right behind the hard disks is the system fan. To the left of that are the I/O slots. Now, if we open the cover of the TX120, then this is what we would see. Okay, I'm just waiting for the page to build up. Yep, okay. So as you can see, if we start at the bottom left, you have the front system fan right next to right behind the hard disk, so that's expelling the hot air, and it's right behind that front system fan is the CPU fan with its own heat sink, and again behind that is the rear system fan. So that's how we would keep the air cool in a system such as the TX120S3. And the next slide gives you a close-up view of the cooling mechanism. There you can see next to the right of the heatsink you'll have the memory slots, and to the left of it the I/O slots. Okay. The next slide shows us on the right-hand side the rear of the cabinet. On the right-hand side you have the LAN ports, and the remaining serial VGA and USB ports are visible on the left of the system. When it comes to the efficiency of the system, the TX120S3, you can see, fulfills the criteria for CSCI Platinum at 115 and 230 volts. So it's a very energy efficient system. Next, we're going to compare the TX120S3 to its older sibling, the TX120S2. The differences we've spoken about already in a couple of occasions, obviously the processor and the chipset. But when we come to the memory, we find that we have a newer memory generation, DDR3 versus DDR2, and the amount of maximum memory has doubled. On top of that, the hard disks that can be integrated have changed because we have 2 different base units, as I mentioned before, and the efficiency of the system has been improved as well. Of course, the slots in terms of their technology have been brought up to speed with Gen 2. The fans stay unchanged. The number of USB ports has increased, as has the number of LAN connections on board. And then in the next slide, we'll see that the RAID stay unchanged, but the IRMT S3 is the main difference versus the older IRMT S2 in the TX120 S2. The next system we'll be looking at, excuse me, is the TX140 S1. The TX140 S1 is an expandable SME all-rounder. So this is very much a classic tower system, which is ideal for really classic file print, web tasks for small business server 2011. For all of these things, it's ideal. At the moment, you can integrate 8 terabytes of data. Later on this year, when we introduce a 3 terabyte, 3.5-inch hard disks, customer will be able to store up to 12 terabytes of data. And if that weren't enough, the customers can either choose to have the TX140 straight away in its own rack cabinet, or they can upgrade later on to a rack infrastructure. But the basic message here is that with all this expansion potential in terms of 8 or 12 terabyte, in terms of rack kit, it really is a system that customers can use for the longer term. So it really is a good investment. And it's also a really good investment in terms of energy efficiency. As some of you may have heard, this system established a huge world record in terms of energy efficiency in the Spec Power 2008 benchmark. It reached a value of 4,549, which may not mean much in numbers, but it means a whole lot when you compare it to the next world record. The next closest one was 40% below that. So this really is a hugely energy efficient system, and I think it's one more reason why this is really good investment for customers. The other reason is, of course, that it's also got some great high availability features. The 2 times 1 gigabit LAN on board, and hot plug hard disk, and RAID 5 and 6 controllers. So it also is a system that customers can rely on when it comes to high availability. The next thing we'll look at is the inside of this machine. Now you can see I wasn't joking when I told you that the TX140 is built on the same motherboard as the TX120, which is why there's so much space in this cabinet. The TX140 is also based on the same chassis as the TX150. So if we look at the top right-hand corner, we'll see that there we have the external drives and the front panel. Below it, the hard disks. Then we have the motherboard with the I/O slots, with the air tunnel. Underneath the air tunnel, you'll have the CPU with its heatsink. To the left of that, you have the DIMM slots, and in the top left-hand corner, we have the standard power supplies. From the back, bear in mind that this has the same motherboard as the TX120. The setup is very similar. On the right-hand side, the LAN ports. On the left, the serial VGA and USB ports. When it comes to energy efficiency, this has a standard PSU, and it's a standard PSU capable of reaching CSCI gold. Now, the next slides we're going to look at are, I think, really important with this system because they compare it to its bigger brother, the TX150S7. So this is a very natural question to ask, what is the difference? When do I use TX140? When do I need a TX150? So we're going to answer those questions right now. Obviously, the TX140S1 has the newer CPU and chipset technology. But when it comes to the RAM, we already see that there's some big differences straight away. The first one is that the number of slots has decreased in the TX140 from 6 to 4. But that's not the main point. The TX140 supports DDR3 1333 megahertz, but it only supports UDIMMs. And that's 32 gigabytes of UDIMMs is the maximum that you can integrate in this system. Whereas in the TX150, you had the choice. You could either integrate 16 gigabytes of UDIMM or 32 gigabytes of registered DIMM when you included an Intel Xeon CPU. Now, this is no longer the case. The maximum expandability is what you would have had using a registered DIMM, but now you'll have that expandability with UDIMMs. The number of hard disks stays unchanged, but the PSU is one of the main differences between the two systems, and it's the fact that the TX140 only has a standard PSU with 90% efficiency, and the TX150 has a redundant PSU as well. So if your customer insists on having a redundant PSU, he is automatically in TX150 territory. The expansion slots are another important item. As you can see, the TX150 has more expansion slots, a total of 6 versus 4 in the TX140. So again, if this is another important criterion for your customer, then he is again in TX150 territory. The fan chassis, there are no differences there. The total number of USB ports has not changed, but the number of LAN controllers on board has, in favor of the TX140. The RAID controllers are the same, and again, as in the other systems, the new generation profits from the IRNCS3 and the optional front service LAN. There is one more important difference which we should also state, which is not on the slide, and that is that if a customer wants to virtualize with a TX140, he can virtualize in terms of Xen. Citrix Xen is supported, as is Microsoft Hyper-V. That is supported as well. If the customer wants VMware, he's automatically in the territory of the TX150. So to summarize, when you choose the TX150, you choose it when you want redundant PSU, when you want more slots, and when you want VMware support. Next, we'll look at the benchmarks. So here we have a series of benchmarks. The baseline processor which Intel chose for these benchmarks was the Xeon X3480. That's the last generation of Intel Xeon processors. And to the right, we're comparing the Intel Xeon E3-1280 in terms of energy efficiency. Now you can see that the latest generation is 81% more energy efficient than the previous one. And this huge gap was achieved using the TX140S1. So you'll remember that the TX140S1 had this great benchmark record of 4,549 SSJ ops in spec power 2008. That is the statistic that is being referred to in the right-hand side of the slide. So there's a big argument there when you're talking to your customers in terms of TCO. In terms of integer throughput, the latest generation was 22% more efficient than the old one. When it comes to floating point throughput, the latest generation was 23% more efficient than the old one. In terms of Java applications, it was 30% more efficient. And when it comes to spec JVB 2008, the increase there was of 19%. Okay, so that concludes the presentation. I'll now ask for the lines to be opened, and I'll take any questions you may have.
Ladies and gentlemen, your question and answer session will now begin. If you wish to ask a question, please key star and then 1 on your telephone, record your name, and press the hash key. If you then decide to withdraw your question, simply key star 2. All questions will be answered in the order received, and you'll be advised when to ask your question. All other lines will remain on listen only. Alternatively, you may submit a question on the web by typing in your question in the question and answer section on your screen and clicking on the Ask button. Just to remind you, if you wish to ask a question, please key star and then 1 on your telephone, record your name, and press the hash key. Thank you. No questions on the audio platforms at this moment. I'm just going to check the web, and nothing on the web at this present moment.
Okay, well, we'll wait a little bit longer, give everyone a chance to sort through their thoughts, think about what they've heard, just in case they do have any more questions. Okay, any last questions before?
No questions at all on either of the platform or the web.
Okay, well, if that's the case, then I'll say thanks very much for listening, and it's been a pleasure having you with us, and we wish you a nice day. Thank you very much. And,
thank you, Marco. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes your conference call for today. You may now disconnect. Thank you for joining, and have a very good evening. Thank you.
Yeah.